Good morning. It's Thursday. We made it over that very, very steep hump day. And it's almost the weekend. Are we going to make it through? I sure do hope so. Yeah. I don't really know what I want to talk about this morning. Astrology is really quiet right now. Just a lot of like background story hum going on. In my live on Monday, I talked about Jupiter back in Scorpio and Saturn in Sagittarius. So I think I'm going to talk a bit about what's coming up. Before I do that though, I'm still having this 15% off sale in my online store, so you should check it out. I've got an ebook on the 12 houses and why they mean what they mean. Aries and Mars have nothing to do with the first house unless you're Aries rising. If that sounds like new information to you or confusing, then you should download my ebook on the houses. I've got an introduction to sidereal astrology, which is a 70-minute webinar. The audio of that webinar and PDF slides. What else is in there? iCal files, so like all of the dates and times the moon changes signs. Hey, winter, in the sidereal zodiac, all of the changes of signs of sun, moon, or sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, plus retrogrades, and some aspects in the 2019 sidereal transits, planetary transits iCal. What else have I got in my store? Oh yeah, the 2019 Sidereal Astrology Guide. I still have some hard copies left, so I can ship you one, but you can also download it. You can download the 2019 Eclipse Guide. And yeah, everything's 15% off. The code is on my page. ORACULARGENIUS is the code. Anyways, so this week has been really just about Jupiter being back in Scorpio and Saturn stationary. Stationary just means that a planet is moving slow. And moving slow just means that this planet is calling for our attention. So Saturn is moving slow. Saturn is like, look at me. Pay attention to me. Are you listening? How are we making our lives a living testimony? Well, what is a living testimony? It kind of makes me think of like testimony service at church. Like testimony service at church is when like you stand up and you say your scripture, or you sing your song, or you talk about how Jesus healed your broken leg, or saved your niece from the fire, or kept your mind, kept your sanity, kept your body. Testimony is an opportunity for expressing gratitude in a public way, an affirmation of what is or what shall be in a communal setting. To make something a living testimony of another thing, so in this case, your intentions and convictions, we are acting upon the world in ways that makes the world more like ourselves. I've shared this before, not sure where, but it might be new for some of you guys. Action is an approximation for intention. I was reading with a client last night, and this client had like 3 planets. They had the sun in Aries, Jupiter in Leo, and moon in Sagittarius, right? All of this fire. And I was talking about, well, y'all about to get the good right now. Get your pens and papers out, because I'm about to share some good juicy stuff with you. So all of these fire signs, right? Fire is the will. And as I explained to my client, your will is not something that you could take out and set on the table and like observe and measure and be like, oh, look at that pretty little will. That will is so cute. Come here, little cute will. It's like, no. Oh man, that had me cracking up last night. Anyways, you cannot like take your will out of yourself and set it on the table and look at it, or like replace parts of your will. Like, the thing I'm gonna do in my will is broken. Let me order a replacement part and get my screwdriver and put it back in. So that like if you have a broken will, like man, you just can't, like it doesn't work that way. So I was explaining to this client that all the fire signs talk to us about the will. And the will is the kind of animating principle of consciousness that undergirds the force that impels us to act. The will is the force that impels us to act, right? So with Leo, you've got the authority of the will. With Aries, you've got the physical strength of will, right? So your physical capacity, capability is the word for Aries. I can do it. Yes, I can. I can, right? Literally having the capability to do something, the physical strength, the developmental physical capability to do something is Aries. And Leo is having the authority to do something, so being in the position to make things so, right? But Sagittarius talks to us about the intention of the will. So if the will is not something that you can directly interface with, right? You can't take the will out, negotiate with it, and have a conversation with it, replace broken parts, tinker with it, paint it, put it in a cute little dress and fluffy socks. Like, you can't do that. So how do you interface with the will? You interface with the will through authority, right? By being in the position of power, you have the capacity and you are entitled to act upon the world around you. That's what Leo means. In Aries, you interface with the will through movement, through physical strength, through acting physically on the world. Whereas Leo is more about shaping perception and designating things a certain way. We interface with the will in Sagittarius through intention. So that authority is an approximation for the will. Physical strength is an approximation for the will. And intention, right, is an approximation for the will. So all action comes from the will, and that that action is an approximation for your intention, for your authority, right? So last night I tweeted about Sagittarius being a fire sign and how fire is kinetic energy, right, in the form of heat. And as you know, anything that is hot emanates this heat, right? Because the molecules are moving so quickly in objects that are hot. They're generating energy in the form of heat. And when something else that is cooler gets in proximity to that hot thing, the cooler thing is going to have that kinetic energy transferred to it. So that now the cooler thing, the molecules are moving quicker. So this is basic laws of thermodynamics. Heat as kinetic energy. Heat can't transference. Go lay out in the sun and don't you see the sun tries to make you just like it, right? It transfers its heat energy to you in order to warm you up, right? So I talked about Sagittarius as the contagion of conviction. So when we're talking about Saturn in Sagittarius, we're talking about the intention of our will, action as an approximation for the intention. And we're talking about, how do I make the outside like my inside? We call fire signs masculine or diurnal because these signs act and enforce upon the world around it. So that means that fire signs are not happy or content to accept the world the way that it is. Fire signs feel the dissonance between who they are and how the world is around them. And just like the sun or fire or any hot object transfers its heat from itself in the form of energy to any object next to it, the fire sign Sagittarius is transferring its conviction in the form of intentional action, right? So when we look to the house in our chart that has Sagittarius on it, this is the part of our chart that is subservient to our conscious intention and conviction, right? And I'm saying conscious intention because not all intentions are conscious. Some intentions are unconscious. Some intentions and some motivations for why we act are not in our conscious awareness. Sometimes they're biological or primal. So wherever Sagittarius is in your birth chart, and it does not matter if you don't have any planets there, don't talk to me about your intercepted houses because I don't use those. Look at your chart in whole sign houses and you will have one house in Sagittarius. And this is the house in your birth chart, the area of your life that is subservient to your conscious intentions. Now, some people, this is a part of their lives that is supportive of who they are, right? So if you're Leo rising or Aries rising, Sagittarius is going to be either on the 5th house if you're Leo rising, or it's going to be on the 9th house if you're Sagittarius rising. And so we know that for you, Sagittarius represent ways to enforce your own will. If you're Leo rising, then your conscious intentions reinforce your entitlement and authority to act upon the world around you. See, you can have an intention to do something, and you can have the capability to do something, but if you have not the authority to do it, right, that's where Leo comes in. That's why Leo is trying Sagittarius. If you're Aries rising, right, Sagittarius is reinforcing your strength of will and capabilities, so that, again, your oh Lord help me, your conscious intention is reinforcing and supporting your will, the strength of your will, the actions that you want to take. For other people, like Scorpio, no, I would say like Taurus rising or Capricorn rising, Taurus rising or Capricorn rising, Sagittarius is in a really uncomfortable position for you. For Taurus rising, Taurus is really just not interested in asking why, right? Taurus is more interesting in seeking external validation in the form, seeking external validation by conforming and assimilating, right? So whereas fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are all about making the world more like them, right? Aries literally through the physical strength of its will, Leo through its authority, and Sagittarius through its intention. Earth signs and water signs, so earth signs are Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo, and water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. We call these feminine or nocturnal signs, and this is because they are impressed upon by the world around them. This means that water signs and earth signs seek to assess the world the way that it is and to respond to the world as it is rather than to change it, okay? So when you have Taurus rising and Sagittarius is your 8th house, it's very uncomfortable for you to act in accordance with your conscious intentions because you have navigated through the world by understanding the social designations you've been assigned and conforming to the expectations that have been placed upon you by your, thanks David, by your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your social class, your economic class and status. So for Taurus, it feels foreign for them to have to take intentional action that is not rooted in seeking external validation through markers of class, right? If you are Capricorn rising, Sagittarius is your 12th house. Again, very uncomfortable for you, right? Because for Capricorn, again, sober assessment of the world as it is. What do I have and what am I going to do with what I have is Capricorn. The way that people are driving this morning is just really annoying. Where was I? Right. So for Capricorn rising, the idea that you could do something for a reason other than one you perceive through your 5 senses, right? So if we're talking about personality typology, Capricorn is sensing, right? Because this is someone who interfaces with the world through their 5 senses. What can be measured and touched and tasted and heard? What is there evidence for? But Sagittarius, again, as a fire sign, is not content with accepting the world as it is. So this idea that they could just be, you know, content, but also that they are willing to work within existing structures is not Sagittarius. So again, for Capricorn rising, this is a really uncomfortable energy because Capricorn is like, well, what we should do based on the information we have, based on the resources that we have is this. But Sagittarius is like, I don't care. I don't care how you've always done things. I don't care what it is that you think you have. The way things have always been is not always an appropriate measure for the way that things could be. So for water signs, again, water and fire are enemies. Water tempers fire. Now, this is a bit more complex relationship for those who have Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio rising, because fire and water can be enemies, but they can also be associates, right? They can be cordial with each other because maybe water doesn't want to be frozen anymore. And in order for water to embody life and be fertile, it needs some fire. It needs some heat. It is the combination of fire in the form of the sun and water that creates the perfect conditions for the womb, that creates the perfect conditions for growth, for growing things. So for fire and water, it's a little bit complicated. Water can temper fire, right? If you get too hot, water can temper fire. So the relationship between Sagittarius and Pisces and Scorpio and Cancer is a little bit complicated. But what we'll say is that, like earth signs, water signs are assessing the world as it is. Water is biology. It's not your feelings. What does that mean? You don't know, and neither do I. Water is not your feelings. Water is biology. It's your physical body, right? Water is the source of life. Life cannot thrive without it. So water is life. Water is the primal experience of your body, right? Your survival instinct in the form of Scorpio, your immediate and primary needs in the when we're talking about Cancer. And for Pisces, it's talking about how our bodies are more than just the physical boundaries of our skin, right? And our hair. Our nervous system is sensitive to things that are outside of our body. And our body does not just communicate with us about what's happening inside our body, like hunger or sleepiness, but our bodies communicate things to us that are not necessarily focused on maintaining the body like in basic primal biological ways. So for Cancer, for example, Sagittarius is the 6th house if you're Cancer rising. And the 6th house has to do with illness. It has to do with our job duties and obligations. If you have Cancer rising with planets in Sagittarius in your 6th house, this can be a marker of overindulgence that leads to illness. So eating too much, eating something you know that you shouldn't eat, drinking too much, drinking something you know that you shouldn't drink, any kind of illnesses that may be like retaining fluid, right? Or growths that hold something like fluid in it. So this is Cancer rising. For Pisces, it's a little bit complicated, so I'm gonna let y'all watch all my other videos on that. And then for what was the other sign? Scorpio, right? Sagittarius is your 2nd house. So this is really important because Jupiter is in Scorpio right now. So I talked about this on Monday, so I'm not going to go too deep in it because I do have a video up. But for Scorpio, Sagittarius is uncomfortable because Scorpio really doesn't have the time to ask why, right? The survival instinct is not something that you're conscious of. The very nature of the survival instinct is that you are unconscious of how your body responds to threats and how your body works to keep you alive. So it is contrary to the nature of Scorpio to act consciously, right? Because when you are under threat, you are perceiving the world through the lens of how do I stay alive, not how do I impress my convictions, right? How do I impress my convictions on the world? Okay, fire, let me finish this up. Fire and air. So air signs are, I'm trying to like get y'all to see me. Okay. Fire and air signs. So air signs are, maybe I should close that now, are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. So fire and air are friends, but they could cause a ruckus, right? If you have too much air, the air is going to put out the fire. Windy air is going to make the fire spread. And fire tends to inspire and heat and expand air. So these two have a rather combustible relationship, pun intended. And so for air signs, fire tends to support, right? Rather than undermine or challenge. So for example, if you are Aquarius rising, Sagittarius is your 11th house of mentors, guides, teachers, community, professional organization, nonprofit organizations. Yeah. So again, this would be for Aquarius rising, how our community organizations, nonprofit organizations, and mentors, guides, and teachers supporting your efforts at self-determination, of identifying yourself and perceiving yourself separate from the designations that have been given to you, and to have an identity that's rooted in your own conceptions of who you are rather than who you've been told you are. If you are Libra rising, Sagittarius is your 3rd house. And the 3rd house, this is something that you may not know. And when I do readings with my clients, the 3rd house and the 12th house are probably the 2 most difficult houses for people to understand, and the houses that my clients tend to be the most shocked to hear what the significations are for those houses. So for the 3rd house for Libra rising has Sagittarius there, and this is your near relatives, your family, all that is familiar to you. So your familiar environment, your near relatives like cousins and aunts and uncles, and even fictive kin like play cousins and god brothers and god sisters and all of those things. The 3rd house is the familiar. So for Libra rising, I would ask how your relationships with your siblings and near relatives are changing. Are you having any type of, I would say, debate or experiencing any resistance around your personal spiritual practice from your near relatives and families? I would ask for Libra rising, and maybe Aries rising too. I would ask both of you, how is your personal spiritual practice affecting your familial relationships? How has your personal spiritual practice deviated from or evolved away from the religious upbringing that you did or did not have? How do you integrate the religious or spiritual experiences that you're having with what it is that you've known or understood about religion and spirituality from your upbringing? And is it supporting, threatening, or undermining, or not affecting your familial relationships and your capacity to maintain connections with your relatives? Gemini rising, Sagittarius is your 7th house, and your 7th house is litigation. A lot of Gemini rising folks are involved in litigation in court cases. A lot of Gemini risings are dealing with business partnerships and contracts. So really examining the intentions of people that you are partnering with, and understanding your own intentions, and understanding how your capacity to take things at face value might make you miss something. I think that's all I want to say. If you have any questions about where your Sagittarius house is, I would start by going to my website, thepeoplesoracle.com, and click Sidereal Birth Chart from the menu bar. Follow those instructions exactly as they're written, and cast your Sidereal Birth Chart. Look for the house that has the little, it really is like an arrow with a cross through it. Look for that house, and that's your Sagittarius house. You could tweet me, you can message me, you can reply to this video and let me know what your Sagittarius house is, and I'll give you some significations for that. Other than that, if you're more interested on the 12 houses, please take me up on this 15% off everything in my store and download the ebook on the 12 houses and why they mean what they mean. Everything that is in that book, are things that will empower and bolster your entire astrological practice and learning outside of just what the houses are. Astrology is really hard to learn, and there's so much information that it's really hard to even gauge like what is accurate or not. So yeah, for my people who are saying they're mutable rising signs, Sagittarius rising and Virgo rising, these are the angles of your house, your chart. So Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius is your physical body and actions you take. Virgo rising, this is your natal 4th house. So this is your father, specifically parents in general, real estate, land and property, and the physical dwelling place of your home. Okay? So these are all things where major change is happening. I'm going to put this video up on YouTube, so fret not if you're just tuning in and you may not have an opportunity to watch it before it disappears on Instagram. I'll be around on Twitter today, so I look forward to interacting with you guys and talking to you more. Happy Thursday.